All right, thanks everybody for your patience. We're going to start in just a moment.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here this morning as we continue to observe the birth of our nation, the 4th of July, a Declaration of Independence. Isn't that it's so exciting? The courage of our founders to have a vision, to act upon it, to declare our independence based on the principle that all people are created equal. It was just remarkable, unheard of. At the time of the revolution following the Declaration, Thomas Paine proclaimed, "The times have found us." We think the times have found us now. Not that we place ourselves in a category of greatness of our founders, but that we do see an urgency to the challenge of our democracy and what is happening in elections from all enemies, foreign and domestic. We take the oath of office to protect and defend the Constitution. Central to that and central to a democracy is the right to vote. Today, I'm very honored that we will be joined by Ariana Nassiri from the San Francisco Youth Commission. We are just thrilled that she is here because she is the future, a powerful voice in our city for our youth and for our nation's future. We're also joined, and this is a special honor for all of us, to be joined by Secretary Alex Padilla, Secretary of State of California. He has been such a champion, such a national leader in so many respects, and setting an example of California. He's a committed champion for the people and a strong advocate for protecting and defending our elections, but again, not just for California, but for an example to the rest of the country. Then we'll hear from California Clean Money Campaign. Thank God for you, Trent Lang. He's fought to protect the sanctity of our elections and to reduce the role of big, dark, special interest money. You know, we talk about voter suppression, but what's important to recognize is one of the biggest suppressions of the vote is big, dark money suffocating the airwaves with misrepresentations, and people just give up on it. So thank you for what you are doing. And then I want to salute my colleague from the Congress, Chairwoman Zoe Lofgren, who's leading Democrats in the fight to defend our democracy with great patriotism. And today we celebrate the passage in the House before the 4th of July break of the SAFE Act, Save America's Federal Elections. And she is a virtuoso legislator. As chair of the House Administration Committee, she's known as the mayor of Capitol Hill. I have to report to her, ask her permission to do things. So thank you for making time to be with us here today. But it is under her leadership and with other members of Congress and our Democratic majority, we have passed H.R. 1, the For the People Act, to secure our elections. It's about this bill, SAFE, that's one piece of it. The Voting Rights Act is a piece of it. John Lewis's voter suppression legislation is part of it. It is all encompassing. This SAFE Act is one piece of it, but we passed the overall bill, H.R. 1, the first day of a new Congress. We've passed this, as I said, the SAFE Act to further strengthen our defenses, and we secured in their appropriation bill $600 million for grants to states to bolster election security, and that's where the California example comes in as well, how to use the resources to bolster our defenses. And this month we'll take further action to harden our democratic institutions against attack. This is our week. In the next 4 days since the 4th of July, but in another couple of days we'll have a classified briefing from the leadership of the intelligence community about the assault by a foreign power on our elections. We've recognized that that has happened. Our president refuses to do so. He just said if they offered help again, he would accept it, giving a green light. That's totally unacceptable, totally unacceptable. But again, we don't agonize, we organize, and we are organizing around legislation, around leadership to get the job done. And now a special privilege for me to bring forward Ariana Nassiri of the San Francisco Youth Commission, a leader for the present, a leader for the future. Welcome, Ariana.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your time. I'd like to begin by once again thanking Speaker Pelosi and her office for asking me to come here today and speak to you all on the importance of voter representation in our nation's electorate, as well as maintaining an integral election system. Now, 2016 provided the archetypical example for as to how susceptible our nation's democratic processes are to interference by foreign powers. When many Americans cast their vote on Election Day, they are exercising the only political power they have. They are going out of their way, traveling to the polling station in their precinct to cast their vote. They are taking time out of their incredibly busy work schedules, sacrificing pay that could put dinner on the table that evening or pay for their child's education to vote. And they're trusting that they are participating in a system that will maintain the integrity and value of this vote. However, by simply sweeping under the rug the evident attack on this system detailed in the Mueller report, we are not only demonstrating the lack of value for this vote and discouraging further Americans to continue to participate, but we are abandoning the democracy that our forebears fought for in the American Revolution. We are devolving as a nation, and that changes now. This change comes through policy reform, such as the SAFE Act and the For the People Act. Now, primary elections are less than a year away, and much of my generation will age into their role as new voters. Millions of newly adult Americans will enter the electorate, but how many of them do we think will participate if they know that their vote will simply be meddled with or completely disregarded? but more importantly, how many American voices will go unheard in the next election. President Obama stated in his farewell address that every American, regardless of party, should be throwing themselves into the task of rebuilding our democratic institutions. However, we can't rebuild democracy with a wall. We can't rebuild democracy in gridlock with a Senate that refuses to act. We can rebuild, however, by fortifying the system on which our democracy depends, the election system. The fundamental doctrine of this nation is democracy. We, the people, built the American dream upon this idea that every hardworking participant in our national community holds a certain level of political power through their vote. This is a level of power that transcends party lines, but is a right granted to every citizen of these United States. The dismissal of this power is not only unethical, but simply unconstitutional. We therefore must continue to support the reinforcement of this system through legislation such as H.R. 1 and the SAFE Act in order to fortify that democracy that was so eloquently outlined in defining moments of this nation. I therefore applaud the efforts of Speaker Pelosi, Congresswoman Lofgren, Secretary of State Padilla, and their constituents in protecting the sacred process, and I encourage all others to do the same. Only then will we see a rise in voter participation and close the discrepancy between the voices of the American people and their reflection in Washington. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariana. Wow. That's not leaders of tomorrow, that's the leader of today. I want to thank Speaker Pelosi for all her work in upholding our nation's fundamental values and institutions. And with the 2020 elections fast approaching, your leadership, Madam Speaker, is both timely and critical. You know, Speaker Pelosi spoke about celebrating the 4th of July, celebrating our independence, celebrating our freedoms, celebrating our democracy and our fundamental values. Chief among them, in my opinion, is our vote, our right to vote, our right to vote without any unnecessary barriers or obstacles, and the right for every voter in America to know that their ballot will be counted and will be counted as cast. Ladies and gentlemen, the defense of our elections must be a top priority for all of government, federal, state, and local. Our elections have been and will continue to be a target for bad actors, both foreign and domestic, who seek to disrupt our electoral process and undermine public confidence in our electoral process. Yet despite the warnings and the evidence from our national intelligence agencies, our federal response has been lacking because Trump and Senate Majority Leader McConnell have obstructed all efforts, even bipartisan measures, to better secure our elections and to invest in our critical election infrastructure. State and local elections officials need consistent, ongoing support to properly maintain our critical election infrastructure, to train personnel on an ongoing basis, and to implement our cybersecurity best practices. 17 years ago, in the wake of the 2000 presidential election, Congress acted on a bipartisan basis when they adopted the Help America Vote Act. The measure included significant funding for states and counties to upgrade voting systems at that time and to create national standards for election administration. Unfortunately, that was the last time Congress approved significant new funding for elections. I'll do the math for you. That was 17 years ago. And the investments made as a result of the Help America Vote Act, the equipment and the technology that was invested in at that time is now 20 years old or older. Today, many state and local elections officials are grappling with voting equipment that has reached or is near life expectancy. Now, in California, I applaud Governors Newsom and Brown and the legislature for not just waiting on the federal government to act. See, the previous fiscal year state budget and the newly adopted state budget together appropriates $220 million for California counties to upgrade or replace their voting systems. And with state funding available for counties, I've exercised my authority as Secretary of State to decertify the older systems that have been utilized by counties in California, but were not tested nor certified to our newer, higher security standards. And we're doing so to make sure new systems are in place in time for the 2020 election. So this means that next year, when Californians cast their ballots, they can do so with confidence, knowing that the equipment being used for California elections has been tested and certified to the highest standards in the nation. That's great news for California. But every voter in America deserves to be able to cast their ballot with the same confidence. Unfortunately, many other states and local jurisdictions around the country have not made the same commitment to the necessary funding to upgrade or replace their voting systems to further secure our elections. If, as Americans, we truly value our democracy and believe that the integrity of our elections is a matter of national security, then we must commit the appropriate and ongoing federal funding necessary for election security and administration. And in addition to funding, Congress should seize the opportunity to make the proven best practices for election security the national standard. Speaker Pelosi points to California as an example that is viewed by most as the gold standard. Our practices include the following. We require testing and certification of voting systems before being used in California. We require logic and accuracy testing of voting systems before every election. We require paper ballots in a voter-verified paper trail for every ballot cast. We require that our voting systems be kept offline to ensure that no one can systematically hack or rig an election. And we require that every county conduct a post-election audit after every election. These policies have served California well for many, many years and represent a proven framework for securing elections and for improving voter confidence. We know that those who seek to undermine our democracy will continue their efforts with both increased frequency and sophistication. And it is unconscionable that the federal government did more in response to hanging chads and butterfly ballots than they've done in response to Vladimir Putin's attacks on our democracy. And let's be clear where the fault lies. As I said before, Mitch McConnell and the Trump administration have obstructed all attempts to approve new funding for upgrading our election infrastructure and to set national election security standards. But Speaker Pelosi and Representative Lofgren have demonstrated leadership, and they've acted with urgency when the Trump administration and Republican leaders have failed. Through H.R. 1 and H.R. 2722, the House of Representatives has provided a roadmap for improving our election security nationwide through common sense, proven practices supported with federal funding. The time to act is now. Election security should not be a partisan issue. Free and fair elections are at the very foundation of our nation's democracy, and we have a collective duty to every voter in America to work together to secure and defend that democracy. Thank you, Speaker Pelosi. It's now my pleasure to introduce, on behalf of the California Clean Money Campaign, Mr. Trent Lange.
Thank you, everybody. I'd like to thank Speaker Pelosi and her office for inviting me here and for her leadership on these issues, both at the nation level and here in California. I'm very happy to be here today to talk about the need for H.R. 1, the For the People Act, which we at the California Clean Money Campaign think is one of the very most important bills in Congress this session and, in fact, in years. In fact, it's the most sweeping democracy reform legislation since Watergate, and it's needed now as much, if not more, than it was needed then. It's very appropriate that we're having this press conference here in California because California has been leading the way improving many of these key reforms. The Supreme Court's appalling ruling not to intervene in redistricting issues, even with blatant partisan gerrymanders, shows the importance of H.R. 1's redistricting rules that California has proven result in elections that are more competitive and more fair. Recent attacks on our elections show how important it is to enhance our election security, as Secretary of State Padilla describes. H.R. 1 provides a key start to protecting elections nationally by requiring the use of paper ballots, providing grants for robust post-election audits, in addition to protecting and expanding voter rights through automatic voting registration, same-day registration, and early voting. These are all crucial reforms that are so important that they are in H.R. 1. But to really have fair elections, we must also end the dominance of big secret money in politics, as Speaker Pelosi speaks very powerfully to consistently. Thanks to a massive coalition of over 350 state, national, and local organizations, we here in California passed 2 years ago, with the support of Speaker Pelosi and congressional leaders like Congressmember Lofgren, passed the California Disclose Act, the strongest disclosure law anywhere in the country. Requires political ads in California on ballot measures and independent expenditures to very clearly show the top 3 funders on a solid black background, each of them on separate lines, so you simply cannot miss who is paying for the ads. Also, the first law anywhere in the country to follow the money, so if groups try to hide behind dark money front groups on the ads, they must be shown on ballot measure ads if they're one of the top 3 funders. Another crucial reform that we have passed and proven here in California. We've also passed the Social Media Disclose Act last year, a California version of the Honest Ad Act, to require similar disclosures of the top 3 funders on Facebook, Twitter, and other online platforms. I'm very pleased that H.R. 1 includes the National Disclose Act and Honest Ads Act, and therefore has many elements of California's proven laws. In fact, in some ways, on the follow the money aspects, it goes even further than we have so far in California, but we'll keep working on that. Finally, we must have small donor citizen-funded elections for Congress so candidates do not have to rely on big money donors. That's why it's important that H.R. 1 provides 6-to-1 matching funds for small donations, similar to San Francisco and Los Angeles, and that it has a pilot project to give voters vouchers that they can give to the candidates of their choice who are qualified so that every voter really has a voice no matter what their financial means. So that's very important that H.R. 1 includes a pilot of that. These comprehensive and powerful democracy reforms are why reformers like the California Clean Money Campaign and the broad national coalition that stood behind H.R. 1 were deeply heartened that the House of Representatives passed it earlier this year in a landslide. They get it. It's unfortunate that the Senate has refused to act so far, but we must keep up the fight. In the meantime, California can continue to set an example by passing laws we're working on here, like SB 47, the Petition Disclose Act authored by Senator Ben Allen, SB 636, the Ballot Disclose Act by Senator Henry Stern, AB 1217, the Issue Ad Disclose Act, so all those ads attacking bills have to show their funders, by Assembly Speaker Pro Tem Kevin Mullen, and by passing AB 1784, the Secure the Vote Act, by Assembly members Miguel Santiago, San Francisco's David Chu, and Lorena Gonzalez, to provide additional funding for publicly owned open source paper ballot voting systems. Let's pass them all, and let's get the Senate to pass H.R. 1. Our democracy is at risk. They need them all. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to introduce Congressmember Zoe Lofgren. Thank you.
Thank you. As Trent has said, H.R. 1 was an important bill that the House of Representatives passed, and it is pending in the U.S. Senate. Because Mitch McConnell has not taken action on H.R. 1, we decided to do something to pull out of H.R. 1 to set on his table something that should be the easiest thing for every American to agree on, and that's securing the actual electoral system. The SAFE Act, which we passed just before we went home for the 4th of July. You know, the Mueller report made clear that our country suffered, and this is a quote, multiple systematic efforts to interfere in our elections in 2016. The report identifies Russian military GRU officers targeting individuals and entities involved in the administration of elections. We know that all 50 states were targeted. In Illinois, the Mueller report confirmed that the Illinois Board of Elections network was hacked. In Arizona, the state elections website was breached, and more recently, we learned that GRU spearphishing operations took place in Florida. At the Science Committee hearing that we had on election security, we learned that early voters in Georgia in 2018 actually saw their electronic voting machines switching votes. There's no indication this was done from a foreign attack, but the machines were switching their votes. That also happened in Texas. It shows the vulnerability of our systems. Now, regardless of your politics, your opinion of the Mueller report, one thing is clear. When you cast your vote, it ought to be counted as cast. Whether you're voting for Donald Trump or somebody else, your vote needs to be counted as cast. Now, Dan Coates, the director of intelligence, national intelligence, said the warning lights are blinking red. The FBI director said, we recognize our adversaries are going to keep adapting and upping their game, and said really that the 2016 attacks were just preparatory for the big show in 2020. That's why we have to act quickly and why we passed the SAFE Act. We authorize $600 million. It's already been appropriated on the House side for election security. That, with the just shy of $400 million appropriated last fall, brings us to the $1 billion that experts say is needed to upgrade systems throughout the United States. We require individual, durable, voter-verified paper ballots. We have accountability measures for software and election technology vendors. And we have additional cybersecurity protections. We have risk-limiting audits that all of the experts say is required. In fact, if you take a look at what's in the SAFE Act, it matches what the National Academy of Sciences said we should do to keep our voting systems safe and secure. This is important legislation, and I'm hoping that Mitch McConnell will come to his senses. He calls himself the Grim Reaper. Let's make sure that he doesn't kill the American electoral system by reveling in the role of the Grim Reaper. We are lucky to have Nancy Pelosi as the Speaker of the House because she's someone who can keep her focused on what's really important for the American people. And it's because of her that these bills that matter so much to our democracy got the time and attention that they did and passed the House. So I'd like to turn it over to Speaker Pelosi at this point.
As you see, we have a vision that we share with our founders. To honor their vision, you see a level of specificity and knowledge of what to do to make sure that our vote is protected, and as all of our presenters have said, that the votes will be counted as cast. Many of them mentioned the Mueller report, several of them mentioned the Mueller report, which clearly concludes that Russians attacked our systems in sweeping and systematic fashion, and top intelligence and law enforcement officials warn the Russians are waging another attack as we speak. We all recognize that. Yet the president openly says he sees no problem with foreign intervention in our elections. And when Senator McConnell, Leader McConnell, as Chairwoman Lofgren has said, calls himself the Grim Reaper with great pride, that he's going to bury all the legislation that comes over from the House, we have news for him. This legislation is alive and well in the public, and we are going to make it just too hot for him to handle burying this legislation, because it is central to who we are as a nation and as a model, not only California to model to the nation, but our country as a model of democracy to the world. And so it's, again, not about politics, it's not about partisanship, it's about patriotism, and that's why we are here today. So I'm very, very, very proud of each of our presenters. Ariana talking about the present and the future, and soon to be old enough to vote in the November election 2020. Secretary Padilla, well, what can we say? Just the master class he gave us on what we need to do. Trent Lang, thank you. You know, the role of money. We won this election in 2018 in the most gerrymandered, voter-suppressed political arena you could form. Is that not right? But because people just organized, as I say, we don't agonize, we organize. It was about owning the ground and getting out the vote. It was about recognizing that big money was playing its dangerous role and that we had to counter it. 100 of our candidates, new candidates, not members, but new candidates, sent me a letter saying they wanted the H.R. 1 to be brought up as the first bill, as it is designated H.R. 1. So this was a drumbeat across America for patriotism and for our democracy. On day one, we passed H.R. 1. As Zoe said, we're taking it piece by piece to send. Now, Leader McConnell, even during the 2016 election, when Senator Leader Reid then and I were asking him to sign a letter to protect our system, was reluctant to do so. But you know what it all comes back down to? Follow the money. It's about big money having an impact on Mitch McConnell, Donald Trump, Attorney General Barr, all of them. They're all in that very, very dark circle. But I have confidence in the American people, and we have not only a vision, but a plan for how we go forward. I thank our distinguished guests, once again, Ariana Nassiri, Secretary Alex Padilla, Trent Lang, President of Education California and Executive Director of California Clean Money Campaign, and Zoe Lofgren, Chair of House Administration. We'd be pleased to take any questions, first and foremost focused on the subject at hand. Any questions? No? I anticipated all of your questions? I'm sorry? Yes, ma'am. Yes. Well, I'd want to yield to Zoe to address it, and I'll reinforce.
Well, the money has been appropriated through the regular appropriations process on the House side, and obviously we need to get through the Senate. But the experts indicate that what we've appropriated so far last year fell short of what's needed. We have equipment out in the country that is still running on Windows 2000. We have equipment that can't even be updated, that is insecure. And so we really feel if the Russians are coming to get us, shouldn't we have a national response? I mean, if this was missiles instead of cyber attacks, we wouldn't be asking the counties to defend the country. No, this is a national emergency. We need to provide the defense that the nation needs.
I'm going to chime in here with what I think is a very important clarification. Yes, when Congress appropriated $380 million last year, it was helpful, it was timely, but it certainly wasn't enough. But I want to be clear what this $380 million was. It was not new money. It was simply the remaining balance of the Help America Vote Act dollars that were approved nearly 20 years ago. So this was money that was intended to address butterfly ballots and hanging chads, not 2020 cyber threats. And so that's why we welcome it, we've utilized it, but we know we need much, much more.
It was astonishing to us that while that money from before was appropriated, the Republicans in the House and in the Senate refused to appropriate any more funds for the additional new needs that we had. It was stunning. It was like, you mean you don't want to protect our electoral system? They didn't. It took us winning the majority to get this line of money out there to protect the electoral system. Anyone else? Well, the American people, we have a number of issues that he said he's going to bury. He's going to bury H.R. 1. He's going to bury the Save America's Federal Elections Act. He's going to bury the DREAM Act and Promise Act about our dreamers. He's going to bury our gun safety bill. All of these pieces of legislation have very broad support in the net neutrality. He's going to bury the net neutrality legislation. The list goes on and on of our top pieces of legislation in our For the People agenda. Our For the People agenda. Lower health care costs by lowering the cost of prescription drugs, bigger paychecks by building infrastructure in America in a green way. He's going to bury the Climate Action Now legislation. All of these have broad support in a bipartisan way across the country. So we are going to make all of it too hot to handle for him. But central to it all is the right to vote. So we have a drumbeat across America. A couple weeks ago, we had, 150 events across the country on issues particularly related to health care. But it all comes back to elections, because elections have ramifications. And that's why they don't want to allocate the resources. That's why they want to ignore the foreign assault on our elections. That's why they want to suppress the vote. That's why they want to gerrymander the districts, because they want to be sure that just their people vote and not the general population. And that's why they're fighting the census. And that's another place where you'll probably see a contempt action on the part of the House of Representatives, on the Trump administration, to bury the census, who we are as a people. Who we are as a people. They want to suppress that and have it only be certain people counted, people who will vote with them. So again, the times have found us to save our democracy in every possible way, and we will make it too hot to handle, especially in the states that matter to Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate. Any other questions on this?
Maybe a technical one for Secretary Padilla. California already has $50 in the budget. Would the federal law add anything to the protections California already has? Would it increase funding and security ranking, or has the state already done what it needs to do?
Sure, good question. At the risk of going into too much detail, I think what the federal legislation calls for would expand what we have in place in California from a paper ballot and a paper trail standpoint to the rest of the nation. where it is sorely needed. Number two, we can absolutely use the additional resources. Number three, I do think it would help us move to whether it's risk-limiting audits or some more sophisticated version of post-election audits. California has required post-election audits after every election. For the most part, it's been a sort of 1% manual tally, but we know that the research has shown us that more sophisticated methodologies gives us a higher degree of confidence with more modern post-election audits. So we welcome that as long as we're auditing paper ballots and not having machines auditing machines. That's an important part of the debate here. But I think the big point here is helping further invest in California and bringing these reforms to other states in the nation.
So did you want to speak to that in terms of the audits?
Well, the risk-limiting audits are statistically valid, so you know if there is a variation, you need to do a bigger audit. This will help the state do that. But we've also included the treatment of electronic poll books as part of the voting system. That will be very helpful in California as we move to a statewide system. So in a county, people can vote any place that's convenient to them. Not every county is in a position to do that yet, but this will help the state move forward in that broad vision of making sure everybody has an opportunity to vote.
And it should come as a surprise to no one that California was an example to us in writing our legislation as well. Any other questions on this subject? Yes, sir. Well, since I mentioned the census, I will consider this part of this conversation, and anyone else who wants to chime in. For a very long time, we have been fighting the fight on the census. This is not just because the court made a ruling, but for a couple of years since the election of 2016. The Constitution of the United States gives Congress authority when it comes to the census. As many of you know, the census is essential in terms of government meeting the needs of people, but also in terms of redistricting. We, the House Democrats, testified on behalf of the Congress, since we're the majority. We testified on behalf of the Congress as that it was essential to have an accurate count in order to do the reapportionment. That's how who serves in Congress is decided. But the other organizations that also testified about how we meet the needs for education, transportation, you name it, all the subjects of need. So this isn't an academic discussion. This is very essential to who we are. What you saw on the part of the administration with the citizenship question is it's disgraceful in this respect. First of all, they decided to put that on the ballot. Why? They couldn't even respond to the Supreme Court on that subject. The Supreme Court did not rule in their favor because they said the administration did not give sufficient evidence as to why the citizenship question should be there. So they kicked the can, and then the administration said, okay, we won't put it on there, and then the president injected himself into this. But this is about keeping, Make America, this hat, Make America White Again. They want to make sure that certain people are counted. It's really disgraceful, and it's not what our founders had in mind. And it's not how we can decide who we are as a people. Who are we? What is America? We celebrate America on the 4th of July. What is America? America is our Constitution, our separation of powers, the co-equal branches of government, the freedoms, including freedom of the press, the guardian of our democracy, in the Bill of Rights. Who is America? America is our Constitution. What is America? It is this beautiful land that God gave us from sea to shining sea and beyond, that they are degrading on every single day that they serve in office. What is America? America is our people, the beautiful diversity of America, and they denigrate newcomers to our country. They dishonor the Constitution, they degrade the environment, the land, they denigrate the diversity that is the beauty of the mix of America, and they undermine our values as a country, who we are as a country. So central to this is the census, which, as money is to the election, the census it's the currency of the realm, the people. And that is the fight that we will continue tonight. You probably will see, we have passed in our Committee of Jurisdiction, the Oversight and Government Reform Committee has already passed a contempt of Congress for Secretary Ross for not responding to the subpoenas of Congress to answer questions as to why do you have this question. It's self-evident as to why they do. And what they want to do is to put a chilling effect so certain populations will not answer the form, that they won't answer the form. They won't respond. And we're saying, don't give them that victory. You must respond, because otherwise they win. So further to your question about other discussions, right now we're in a discussion on the money. They're saying, oh, most people will probably just respond to the census online. But really? Online? Not so. Maybe half will, but not 80% will. And so we must have the outreach that is necessary. And in that outreach, they say, oh, well, maybe one knock on the door, maybe two knocks on the door, that should do it. We just need resources for 1 or 2 visits to a home. Not true. It's never been that. It's been 5 or 6 times you visit. But in addition to that, the most important part, and more important now than ever, is the fact that community groups that have the linguistic and cultural confidence of the people we're reaching out to need the resources to do that outreach. So whether it's on the policy, whether it's on the subpoena power, whether it's on the money, those are the discussions that we're having now. So did you want to speak?
Sure. In addition to what the Speaker has said, obviously that we know from the information that's come out that the intention was to suppress response to the census. The intention was that people of color would not respond to benefit the Republican Party. That was overt. But there's another element that I think the President has made clear. Since the very beginning of the nation, when, as you'll recall, only white men who owned property could vote, but everyone was counted nevertheless, not just voters. We've always counted every person. The President said he wants this information for redistricting purposes. The intent may be to count only U.S. citizens for redistricting purposes, which violate the Constitution. I think that may be a goal that they have. The legal case is really twofold. We have a case on due process that the court ruled on. It's interesting that the Trump administration made an emergency plea to the Supreme Court that they rule on the case about equal protection out of Maryland, even though it had not been briefed or argued to the court, because there is a separate case that deals with the intentional discrimination aspects that has not yet even been heard by the Supreme Court. So I think it is very unlikely that this will be resolved by the courts or to benefit Mr. Trump's ideas. And the idea that he apparently thinks if he makes a statement, he's not subject to the court's ruling is bizarre. But that's our president.
If I just may follow up on what Zoe said about redistricting. As you know, subsequent to the arguments, the oral arguments that were presented at the Supreme Court, there was a disclosure of a man who died, and when they had his hard drive, they found that the purpose of this was for redistricting. Now, the court said it's too late and this or that, but nonetheless, the court said that they did not justify the purpose. But this is again, the essence of who we are, and we are fighting very hard on this, and however it comes out, we have to make sure that people do not take the bait that they are counted, because they do count. Any other person? I know you had one. Just any other? Yes, ma'am. On that.
Well, we have already passed it in the House, and we are urging the Senate to act promptly. We would like these resources to be made available to states in time for the 2020 election. That's what the Director of National Intelligence and the Director of the FBI have told us we need to be worried about. So the sooner the better. If they passed it this fall, we'll be scrambling to get ready. And so we would urge quick action on the part of McConnell and the Senate. This is the National Academy of Science recommendations. This isn't some, Democratic plot. Who knows who's going to attack us next? It was the Russians last time to benefit Mr. Trump. It could be the Chinese to benefit a Democrat. The whole point is every American citizen should have their vote counted as cast.
If I can just add to that a little bit, Madam Speaker, you'll recall that back in February, I testified before the House Homeland Security Committee where this question came up. And there was two Secretaries of State at the table. A colleague from Alabama who went on and on about how, well, it takes long for federal money to get to the states, to get to local jurisdictions and the RFP process and the contracting process, et cetera. I disagree. Once again, California shows a way forward. The way we can disperse federal funds quickly and efficiently in time for the 2020 elections is once Congress has acted and there's a signature on legislation, we can count on that money. And we can work with counties in California to allow for those expenditures to be made immediately, knowing that they will be reimbursed for those qualified expenses. So my answer to the question is not just sooner rather than later, but yesterday, but that there is still ample time for these new funds to positively impact 2020 election security.
And your question is right on point, because the reason the Republicans want to hold it up is because they know it will make a difference in the outcome of the elections. What's really sad about the whole thing is that the Russians have made an assault on elections in other democracies, in Europe, for example, and what they're trying to do is undermine democratic governments. That's their goal, is to undermine democratic governments. So this is a big agenda for Vladimir Putin, the richest man in the world, by the way, on a government salary, so follow the money. For the President of the United States to make light of it once again, just again shows the dishonoring of the Constitution of the United States in the week that we celebrated the 4th of July. So we feel people have said to us, okay, the Russians disrupted our elections. They made a difference in our elections. What are you going to do about it? Safe. We're going to be safe. Save our federal elections, H.R. 1, protect the whole groundwork of our elections with H.R. 1, whether it's redistricting, whether it's voter suppression, and the list goes on. And again, protect who we are as a people by protecting the census. Thank you all very much for coming. Thank you. Yeah, but I want to excuse our guests because they may not want to be here all night. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. I'm sorry? I heard the first part, but I didn't hear the last sentence. Oh, Steyer getting in. I didn't hear that. Well, first of all, let me say how proud I am of Eric Swalwell. Eric Swalwell is the future. In his 30s, was even in his late 20s, early 30s, he came to the Congress, still in his early 30s, part of the Democratic leadership in the Congress. He had a message of national security and gun safety that he wanted to convey to the country, and he did that. He has now made, well, has he made a statement yet? I don't want to speak to something that hasn't happened yet, but our anticipation is that what my understanding is that weighing the equities of what it means to advance his candidacy versus getting closer to the time where we have a nominee to win the White House. I think all of this speaks to the urgency of Donald Trump not having another term. That would be very seriously damaging to our country. I don't know that much about Tom Steyer getting in. I just don't know. Is that happening? I don't know. Yes.
I wondered if you had a message to your four freshman colleagues who, according to Maureen Gallup and times, you had like a somewhat dismissive message about all these people, the four who voted otherwise on the border security bill.
It wasn't dismissive. Yeah. You know, it wasn't dismissive. It was a statement of fact. They were four who argued against the bill, and they were the only four who voted against the bill. All I said was nobody followed their lead. That's what that was. No, all I said was a statement of fact. Four of them opposed the bill. We were protecting the children. Overwhelmingly, our caucus voted to protect the children. Our blue dogs, our moderates, and all the rest voted to protect the children. They did not, and they did not have a further following. So that was what I was saying. They have a following in the public. I'm just talking about in the Congress. Thank you all. Yes, we gather here on a serious matter about our Constitution and our country and the 4th of July. But wasn't it just wonderful this weekend to see the women's national team be triumphant in the soccer final? So first thing I did was put out a tweet that congratulated them and said, now let's give them fair pay, because that has not been, they have shown their talent and their greatness. Now let's show them the money. And then, in a subsequent tweet, I invited them to the White House on behalf of our bipartisan, I said, by popular demand on both sides of the aisle, with Kathy Castor and Congressman LaHood, Democratic and Republican co-chairs of the soccer caucus, in a bipartisan way. We invited them to the Capitol as a group, or if they just want to come individually with their families, any way they'd like to come, we'd like to welcome them and to honor them. But aren't we proud of them? What strength, what energy, what patriotism. My daughter Christine was there. We were watching the game with with my grandchildren and all the rest. It was pretty exciting, wasn't it, Christine? I went to Mass the night before, so I didn't have to miss any part of the game. Let the record show. Thank you for that. Thank you for reminding me to say that. Thank you. It's what we've been talking about all morning, but thank you for paying attention to the matter at hand, our democracy. Thank you all.